within mains, I'll talk about two main things as separate topics as well. Two things which were important for me. One is answer writing, the second is note making. So for answer writing, I think there are a lot of things that are important, and I managed to get decent marks in my GS papers and my optional as well. And I felt one reason for that was also, looking back again I can say, is answer writing. I used to practice answer writing, and not just practice it, but analyze how I've written those answers and build up on them later as well. So firstly, I think what is important is understanding the question, and this is it's a very easy thing to do, but lots of people don't do it, and I feel that if you just understand the question and answer what is being asked, half your battle is won. Because this is one of the challenges that I personally also faced in the early part of my preparation. And even in that time, when you're writing the examination in the mains hall, there are two challenges. One is content, you have to write good content. The other is time. The clock is constantly ticking on your head. So maintaining that balance becomes very important. Either you're writing really good answers, but you're leaving 5 questions at the end, which doesn't help because the competition is so much. Or you're completing it in the time limit, you're scribbling your way till the end, but the content is not good. So for managing that, only practice is the way, and not just practice, but correct practice. So firstly is understanding the question. There are certain keywords also used in the question: evaluate, analyze, this, that. And it's important not just to jump at the only word you know and start writing about it. It's important to understand why this question is being asked and cater to that as well. So say this time there was this question on evaluate the nature of Bhakti literature and its contribution to Indian culture. So sometimes when you don't know enough about Bhakti literature, you will just start writing about Bhakti. You will start writing about Nanak, you'll start writing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this, that. And half your page is done, then you'll write 1-2 points about Bhakti literature or something. The important thing is, even if you don't know exactly how, say, Bhakti literature, what the nature is, its contribution is, try to orient your answer according to the demand of the question. So start writing about Bhakti literature only. Start writing about, so I think in this paper, in this question, what I did also, I made, so although it's not required, but for visual presentation, I made this map of India slightly on the corner, and I jotted it down, jotted the different Bhakti literature across the map, on the map itself. So say the Bishun Pad or Mirabai's this thing, everything, Lal Ded's this thing, Abhangs in Maharashtra and all of that. So even at a glance you could just see what those things were about. Then the nature of Bhakti literature. So look at the keywords, and this is something that I used to do. I used to divide the question based on the questions and on the words that were used. So nature of Bhakti literature, what is the nature? So say devotional, and then give an example. Try to give what you're saying and provide an example to it, so the examiner doesn't have to think too much. The examiner knows that, you know, this is what she means and this is how she's displaying it. So nature of Bhakti devotional, then poetic, so you talk about certain poetry compositions, then something else, something else. Then the second part of the question was its contribution to Indian culture. So the contribution you think about, and when you make these headings, even if you didn't know the answer yourself, you start making links in your head also, such as what can be the contribution of Bhakti literature. It can possibly be to, bringing about this temple tradition, how these Bhakti songs were sung in the temples, how that created this thing, the musical culture that probably developed out of it. So these are things that you won't read, but you can associate with things around you. And sath mein you're providing examples about, say, Shankaracharya, and these are things that will come because we have things that we've seen in our homes, we've seen somewhere else. So if you just stick to the wordings in the question, what is being asked in the question, rather than coming back to only what you've read in the books, you know, Bhakti I read in that book, Nanak was written, Kabir was written, so I'll just write that. That won't fetch you marks. Understand what the question is, try to relate it with your environment around you, and try to answer those questions in that way. So firstly, most important, understanding what the question is. There were questions in GS3 this time which none of us knew. Like, there were half the questions were random questions. But I still managed to get, I think later I got to know decent marks there, because I tried to reorient what I knew according to the demand of the question, rather than just writing anything I knew or just leaving those papers blank. So understanding the question, answering only what the question is asking is important. Secondly, Uh, Content. So this again was another example I wrote down. Analyze distinguishing features of the notion of equality in the constitutions of USA and India. So this was, I think, a 15-marker question, and there are not too many differences. But what sometimes people did was they didn't know differences in equality, so they wrote differences in the constitutions of USA and India. But that's not what the question is asking. So try to answer what are the differences in equality. Even if you're not getting, try to reorient the question, the differences you know between the constitution in terms of equality. Try to shape what you know in terms of the demand of the question. So these are two examples that I remembered. Secondly is content. So first is you understood the question, but if you don't have the content, how will you do it? So that content wala thing, you have to do the background work, and that is when I'll come to note making and all of that. In the examination hall, during those 3 hours, you don't have the time to think. You can't just sit around and think, acha, this, that. All of that you need to do before the examination, and your content, to a large extent, apart from on-the-spot thinking, needs to be prepared. For that, for example, GS2, which is polity and all, I had prepared lists, or in the sense topics and committees that I could quote. Say in railways, I will talk about the Anil Kakodkar committee. In something else, I'll talk about the second ARC and the recommendations that they've given. So you're not just writing random things, but you're adding to it. Once your basic, and this can only be done once your concepts are clear. If you're starting your preparation and you start doing this, it won't fetch you anything because your basics are not clear yet. But once your basic content is done, to make it better. So my aim was in answer writing this year to make my answer better from the person before and after me. And how could I do it? By adding content to it. So say committees in GS2, then GS4 is ethics. So I used to look at the newspaper, keep picking up examples and quotes and keep writing them down, keep using them in my papers. So GS4 there were committees, then GS3, so for economics, some data that I found in the newspaper, or say recently a national health survey has come. So if a question on population, I think this time was asked. So talk about the data in that national health survey, talk about say the sex ratio, how it has changed. So it adds certain value and you feel that you know what you're talking about rather than just, saying things in the air. It adds some heft to your answers. So content is something that you can work on before you're writing the paper, specifically for different papers, different things you can do. Thirdly, even if you have content, even if you have understood the question, a challenge comes in putting it on paper. And I had a humanities background. I had the habit of writing really long answers. I wrote 8 pages answers in my graduation papers where, you had to write four questions in like 2 hours or 3 hours. So changing that to the demand of this paper was definitely tough, but I managed to do that. I had started with a very different writing style, I ended with a very different writing style, so that is something that all of you can do. So I used to write in paragraphs, I used to write really long introductions, but I tried to press a lot of information later on in points. So before I was writing the paper, I used to think that this is a problem, this is an issue that happened with me last time, I used to do this. So this time I'll try to do at least this. I'll try to at least make the introduction only 2 lines or 3 lines, or I'll try to introduce, if I could write only 3 points in my last paper because I was writing in paragraphs, I'll try to write at least 5 points this time. So these are things before I was writing, I used to tell myself and try to, implement it. So maybe you won't write 5, maybe you'll write 4, but next time maybe you'll make that jump to a 5, next time you'll maybe make that jump to a 6. So these are things that you told yourself. In terms of structuring the answer, what I used to do was, I used to use subheadings. So things like I said initially, evaluate the nature of Bhakti literature, contribution. So I used to write a short introduction about the Bhakti tradition and some quote or something in Sanskrit I wrote, I think, in the first introduction for this thing about Bhakti literature. How about it coming from the root bhaj, or to incorporate or something, involve yourself in the divine. I wrote that introduction. Then I made a subheading about nature of Bhakti literature. And I started writing from here. So the nature of Bhakti literature I wrote here. Then the points I started writing, leaving a certain gap. So in terms of visual structuring, it becomes easy for the examiner to see and understand, even if your writing is not good. Some people have that problem. But if you have it clearly divided, so if right here you're writing the heading, then starting from here you start writing the points 1, 2 and 3. If you have an example, I used to write it further to this side and make a triangle. So I used to write example and make a triangle there. So when you're looking at a paper, the examiner could see, acha, she has used 4 examples because there were 4 triangles that were drawn. So this structuring is something that you will get over a period of time. I also looked at other toppers' copies. I incorporated whatever I saw in it. So using subheadings, underlining, starting writing in points. So you need not write very long sentences. You can skip out the a and the sometimes. Not that the person shouldn't understand only what you're writing, but you can leave out certain things. You can just write the basic terms. So points is something that I used. Subheadings, underlining. In terms of visual structuring, I talked about spacing. So spacing was something that I used. Maps, which I talked about in the first paper. Similarly, for geography. And these are things that you can't do in the paper. Because you can't think that much. So practice the India maps, practice the world maps. That is something that I used to do. And say for geography, I had 2 pages. I just went through all the NCRTs, picked up all the diagrams that I could use and do them on 2 pages. Similarly for economics, I was just going through the monthly magazines or yearly magazines or any other source that I found and just drew the charts or flow charts that I could draw. So there was this chart on financial inclusion, and I knew that if a question on financial inclusion came by chance, I could draw it and it could add some sort of value to my answer. So these are things that you drew before, and then before the examination you just went through them ki acha, this is something that I can draw. Towards the end, this is what you do. You focus on the committees, you focus on the examples, you focus on these diagrams. So these are things that you can directly reproduce in the paper if the question comes. Don't just do it just for the heck of it. Sometimes people do that also. Randomly they're doing diagrams, randomly they're drawing charts. You need to do it only so that it makes your answer better. Don't unnecessarily bombard your things with these visual things, but if it's making your answer better, definitely do it, because it adds some sort of diversity from the paper before and after you. And all of this is done, but more than that, it's practice. You can just do this one day and not do it later, and it will be of no effect at all. So this is something that you need to do on a regular basis. Every day when you're looking at the newspaper, you need to pick up examples. Every day when you're looking, every day when you're writing, you need to come back to the notes that you've made. That is important. So practicing, and more than practicing, analysis also. So sometimes what people do is they practice answer writing every day. They write 3 answers every day, 4 answers every day. I used to, apart from the test series, so the later test series that I joined, I also did practice within a group of friends, 3-4 friends we had. We used to practice previous year question papers and look at each other's answer copies and see, acha, your introduction is better. So this is, if this question comes, this introduction can be used, or this example is better, so I'll incorporate that there. So even if you're writing 3 questions, come back and analyze, acha, this is something that I could have added. This is something that was in my notes. So maybe if I could put it here, coming back to my notes. So that will take some time. It won't be ki, just wrote, closed your copy, next day wrote, closed your copy. That won't help at all. Practice plus analysis, and using that analysis in the next time that you write your answers. So that is something that probably helped me in my answer writing process. So this was my answer writing specifically. Apart from that, for mains preparation, the basic books you would have already gone through 3 or 4 times. And yeah, this is something that I forgot to say, but for me personally, prelims I at least made sure that I had done 3 revisions in those 3 or 4 months before of the basic books that I had, or whatever thing that I was following, whether it be it Spectrum for history or anything, or the NCRT for geography. I used to make at least 2-3 revisions. It depends on you, how much you've read that paper. If you're doing it for the first time, maybe more, maybe less, but just to make sure that it sticks in your head. So those revisions you've already done before. Here also, now you can go through whatever basic books that are required. So for mains, you need to stick more to the syllabus, I feel, rather than just sticking to a book, because book you have gone through, your concepts are clear, but orienting them to, and there are certain topics which you won't find in books, or you'll have to look, say for example, governance topics. If you find a book on governance or some notes on governance, coaching notes, that's well and good. If not, try to make small 1-page notes of it. Say, I used to make notes apart from that. So the second topic apart from answer writing is note making. For some people, note making does help. For some people, it doesn't. It depends on your way of studying. For me, it did help. So I'll talk about myself. I did not make notes of all the basic books. Some people do that. I did not. Sometimes for example, for geography, if I'm going through it, there's certain data about, say, crops, their percentage in world crops and Indian crops. So I used to make a small chart towards the end of the chapter itself, and agar end mein revision karna hota tha, so I used to go through that. But mostly I did not make notes of the basic books, because I thought they were well enough, they were like compact enough, and I used to just underline things that I thought were important when I was doing revision. But for certain topics in the syllabus, which I felt I could not find information elsewhere, if I thought there were certain current affair topics in the news, in the newspaper, which were going on for a really long time, say the farmer bills, if it's going on for a really long time, I'll make 1 or 2 pages notes out of it, so I can use it, say, in agriculture, or if I find, say, an article on fertilizer policy in the newspaper. So I used to not make notes of newspaper per se. Some people make copious everyday notes of the newspaper. I did not find that helpful, because at the end you have like a huge this thing of newspaper. It takes a lot of time in the day, so I did not find that helpful. Some people do, but I used to just pick up things that I found in the newspaper which were important according to the syllabus. So fertilizer policy, I know, can come in the agriculture part of GS3. So that awareness of the syllabus, that familiarity with the syllabus, you need to build over a period of time and make notes according to that. So that fertilizer thing that I made, then I used to leave some space on the side. So if I find anything else, I'll keep on adding that later. Similarly for, say, cybercrime or so cybercrime or something like that was in the syllabus clearly mentioned. So for that I had made 1 or 2 pages notes. Any example that I found of, say, some attack that happened here, some red dot network attack happened there, or Estonia mein there was this cyber attack. Those things I used to keep on adding and then use them in my answers. So these things like enhance your answers a bit. Some other people are just writing whatever notes that they found or whatever book that they used. But when you see examples of, say, US mein ye wala attack happened, shadow network ye ho gaya, ya Pegasus attack ye ho gaya, so it adds some newness, and the examiner thinks that she knows what's happening and she can make these links. So these additions I used to keep on making from the newspaper, apart from making my main notes that I used to do according to the syllabus, according to any topic that was in the news. Why is note making important according to me? And that is the way you should make those notes, because sometimes what people do is कि अच्छा notes बनाने हैं, किसी ने बोला है कि notes बनाने, it's important. So I'll make notes, and those notes don't serve any purpose, because it's more or less you're repeating and you're copying whatever was in the book. You just literally remove a few words and you write them in your own words, or you write them by removing a and the. So that doesn't help at all, because you should understand why you're making them. There's a purpose to the note making. So firstly, according to me, it's to try out or take out the important stuff, or what is important. So you're removing what is not important and what is of most importance in using it. So the notes, the next time you make, like if it's 100 words, it should come down to at least 40 or 50. Otherwise there's no point to making it, or even less if you can. The smaller they are, and if you can understand it. Understanding should also be there. It's not as if कि अगली बार आप पढ़ो आपको समझ ही नहीं आ रहा आपने क्या लिखा है, because इतना छोटा कर दिया. But you should understand. It should be for yourself. So prying out the important information, collating important information. Because say if it's a topic in the syllabus, it's possible that you can find good information from 2 sources. So sometimes I used to make notes collating those 2 sources. Or if it's a topic in the syllabus, I used to do a Google search, find 4 or 5 sites and just take out important bits, important examples and make one information. So taking out important stuff, so reducing it. Secondly, collating information from a couple of sources, keep on adding to it. Some people used to make online notes, that you can also do. I used to find it more comfortable writing. So that was my personal preference. It's sometimes easier to make online notes because it can be easily edited. So that is also something you can do on Evernote or anything, or anything on your laptop also you can make. Thirdly, revising revising ke liye it's important, because immediately before this examination, and it especially helped me for my optional, because optional history was very, very vast. I could not possibly have gone through all the books before my examination, so I used to make notes. Those notes itself are also pretty big, because even after condensing, the syllabus was that vast, but it helps you for revision, because in the end you can only look at those notes, so it needs to be short. So for revision, for collation, and for highlighting important stuff and gradually reducing it. So sometimes people make notes 2 times. Firstly notes, and then notes of notes to even shorten it towards the end for extremely last minute revision, just keywords. So that is something that you can do. which books and which areas you're making notes of, you need to decide. No one else will tell you according to your needs. Secondly, they need to be crisp, I've already told you. And thirdly, they need to be oriented to the syllabus. Don't write random stuff, they need to be oriented to the syllabus. So these were two things which are, I thought, mainly important for mains. Thirdly, a thing which helped me, apart from mains, answer writing and note making, was looking at toppers copies, because apart from the whatever test series you'll enroll yourself in, whatever feedback you will give, that is also important. You'll incorporate the next time you write tests. But thirdly, toppers copies help you in understanding what possibly got those people those marks. Right? So it's possible that you may not like one person's copies or another person's copies, but out of a group of 5 or 6 that you can explore, there'll be 2 or 3 things that you can incorporate. And sometimes people don't understand what's going wrong. People are giving attempts after attempts and not getting good marks, and that's because mainly they keep on sticking to the things that got them those marks. So it's important to get out of that cocoon, look at what other people are doing, and possibly learn from anything that is being given to you. So in that way, toppers copies of certain subjects, of certain examples that I used to find in ethics copies, I used to, a quote I found, so I used to use that. An example I found somewhere else, I used to use that. Structuring of answers, those things also, I think you can, they're all easily available. You can go through them and add to your answers in any way.